Hi, welcome to today's episode of Stand Up, where each and every day I find the smartest, bestest people I can talk to, and I ask them questions. That's the show. It's what the show's always been. I don't have the answers, but my guests always do. I'll give you my best take, but I'm looking for the best people I can find to talk to you about the most important and most impactful issues that affect you, your planet, your country, your community, the environment, and everything else. So let me know who you want to hear on the show. standupwithpete@gmail.com. Join me today, a longtime listener of the old show, a regular caller who's become one of our favorite guests because somehow, some reason, he sure does know a lot. Bill B. in D.C. Bill Boyle is my guest. We talked about Ukraine-Russia for a while. We talked about the government shutdown. We talked about No Kings protests and much, much more. Great conversation with Bill Boyle. And if you want to jump to the conversation itself, to the interview, you can fast forward, as we used to say, or skip ahead to about 30 minutes into today's show. But I hope that you will stay here, because I also every day have a great news recap for you, which is worth the price of a subscription alone. For as little as $5 a month, you can gain access to our community, our Hangouts, our Discord platform, and support one of the best independent media outlets out there, at least someone who operates alone, independent of any corporate massive giant, or even some of these big independent giants that have started to form, from the Midas Touch to the Pod Saves. Nah, it's just me, and I am beholden to you. So that's it. That's what we do every day, and I'm going to get right to it right now. Thank you very much, though, to my friend Glenn Kirshner, who had me on his live Substack last night, and welcome to anybody who might be listening as a result. It was great to be over there with Glenn. Went so well, I think I might share the audio here as part of tomorrow's show. It was a great conversation that we had, and I was really happy with it. And of course, Glenn is an old friend of mine, and we talk all the time, and I love him to death. You should subscribe to his Substack if you haven't already, but you probably already have, because everybody is subscribed to Glenn. He's the best. It really, really is, and so supportive of me, and so great to have new folks here, if that's the case. Oh, and thanks to those who have upgraded their subscriptions. Several of you did that. Dominic, I saw that yesterday. Thank you, my friend. And so you can always pay more. If you're paying $5, you could pay $10, and it makes a huge difference here in such a small shop. So anybody who's doing that, it makes a big difference. I appreciate it. Patreon.com/Pete Dominic. Let's do it. Yesterday, there was a lot happening, and of course, I think I've got to start with one of the big stories, which is that apparently our Mad King can now send troops to Portland. Well, at least that's what an appeals court said, 2-1. It was the Ninth Circuit. Two judges that voted for were, in fact, actually Trump appointees, if that matters. They've sometimes voted against them. But a panel of federal appeals court judge announced yesterday, that Trump administration can, for now, move forward with its plans to deploy National Guard troops to Portland, Oregon. The decision opens the door to some federal troops being stationed at an ICE facility in South Portland that has been the site of street protests since June. The ruling, which disputed a lower court's contention that protests in the city have been largely under control, lifted a temporary block on the deployment. It was not immediately clear, however, whether the order also allowed Trump to use National Guard soldiers from Texas or other states, as he suggested he might do. The two Trump-appointed judges who wrote the ruling cited instances in which demonstrators in Portland attempted to set fires at the building, threw rocks and sticks, threatened officers with knives, shined lights in officers' eyes, and shot paintballs at officers. In a dissent, a judge appointed by Bill Clinton said the ruling was, quote, absurd and, quote, erodes core constitutional principles. Legal wrangling over the deployment is almost certain to continue. Lawyers for Oregon and the city of Portland immediately asked for the case to be reconsidered, and I'll give you some more analysis from Lisa Rubin coming up here in the clip show, which I do after the headlines. So that was probably the top story from yesterday. Should mention that Japan has its first female prime minister. But not all women are celebrating. Japan elected Sane Takaichi as the nation's first female prime minister, but she's a hardline conservative. So that might be one reason why. She's 64 years old, and she's the leader of the governing Liberal Democratic Party. She was elected by lawmakers from the lower house of parliament, also elected by the upper house lawmakers. And though her election is a milestone in a country where women are severely underrepresented in the government, Taikaichi enters office with a fragile coalition facing a number of pressing challenges, including a visit next week by Trump. Well, that should go great. Trump meeting the first female prime minister of Japan. I'm sure she'll handle him just fine. Smart Japanese lady. She says her hero is the former British conservative leader Margaret Thatcher. Uh-oh. It's getting worse. Anyway, I thought I would mention that. We'll give her a chance, I guess. I don't know what I'm supposed to say. I don't know anything about Japanese politics, but I did want to mention that. Here at home, Trump is tearing down the White House. Did you see this? The White House started demolishing part of the East Wing to build Trump's ballroom, and people are losing their minds because it just looks terrible. It just looks terrible that a giant machine's tearing down the walls of the White House because, of course, the traditional base of operations for the First Lady, the East Room, by the way, the East Wing, which is where they're doing it. And the ballroom's going to cost $250 million, despite lacking approval for construction from the federal agency that oversees such projects. Yeah, whatever. What the fuck? Who cares? Trump and his press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, said nothing will be torn down when the project was announced in July, but they tore a bunch of stuff down. So people are losing their minds, or pretty upset about that. And I was losing my mind, and many others, yesterday when everything that we use in the internet seemed broken and down, from Venmo to Riverside, which is an app people use to stream interviews. Having all kinds of problems with it yesterday. You probably were as well. Amazon said its systems are back online again after connectivity issues persisted yesterday. Reports of problems with Amazon's cloud computing services unit, Amazon Web Services, AWS, continue. Before the latest round of issues, Amazon said it fully mitigated an earlier outage. Several popular websites and apps, including Snapchat, Facebook, and Fortnite, were impacted. Banks, cryptocurrency exchanges, Coinbase, and AI firm Perplexity also reported issues, as did airlines Delta and United. One expert said the financial impact of yesterday's disruption could cost hundreds of billions of dollars. Were you affected by it? Did you lose money? Let me know. All right, a few other stories I wanted to mention from the last couple of days. Here's a doozy from the Washington Post. Gets the exclusive. This is an important story. Apparently, in the days before the Trump administration deported hundreds of Venezuelan immigrants to a notorious prison in El Salvador, the president of that country, El Salvador, he demanded something for himself, the return of 9 MS-13 gang leaders who are in U.S. custody. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, in a March 13th phone call, apparently, with the Salvadoran President Nayib Bukele, promised the release would be filled, according to officials, with knowledge of the conversation. And there was an issue that some of the MS-13 members that he wanted were informants under the protection of the U.S. government, Rubio told him. To deport them, Attorney General Pam Bondi would need to terminate the Justice Department's arrangements with those men. He assured Bukele that Bondi would complete that process and Washington would hand over the MS-13 leaders. His extraordinary pledge illustrates the extent to which the Trump administration was willing to meet his demands, Bukele's demands, as it negotiated what would become one of the signature agreements President Trump's early months in office. So it's a terrible, terrible precedent to set. And apparently the deal gave Bukele possession of individuals who threatened to expose the alleged deals that his government had made with MS-13 to help achieve El Salvador's historic drop in violence. So it's a whole big scandal, and it's going to be coming out a lot more. Hopefully, people will pay attention to this. Hopefully, Marco Rubio will be asked about it. And promising to terminate the informant arrangements, current and former Justice Department officials say Rubio threatened to undercut years of work by U.S. law enforcement to apprehend and secure the cooperation of these high-ranking members, one of the world's most deadly gangs. The deal is a deep betrayal of U.S. law enforcement, whose agents risked their lives to apprehend those gang members, said a U.S. contractor who worked with federal officials to investigate and help dismantle the MS-13 gang. Nixing the agreements threatened to damage the credibility of the Justice Department, which routinely relies on informants to build cases against high-level criminals. But you know what? We have a high-level criminal in the White House, so why would we care? Anyway, big story from the Washington Post yesterday, and hopefully everybody hears about it in different media outlets. I fear they won't. Also, this, speaking of South America, well, that was Central America, but Colombia said yesterday it has recalled its ambassador from Washington after Trump said he would raise tariffs on the South African American nation and stop all payments, intensifying a feud stemming from U.S. military strikes on vessels allegedly transporting drugs. Allegedly is important because they might not have been. Trump also called Colombia's leftist president Gustavo Petro an illegal drug leader. He called him a drug leader. Meanwhile, he's making a deal with a drug leader in Central America. Nothing makes sense or matters. Everything is transactional. Yeah. The two survivors, by the way, of that military strike on the suspected drug-carrying vessel in the Caribbean are going to be sent to Ecuador and Colombia, their home countries, according to Trump. He said this. The military rescued the pair after striking a submersible. So they struck this submarine and guys survived? How the hell? It was at least the sixth such attack since early September. Completely illegal and wild that it is happening. Also yesterday, 7 Tennessee officials sued over the deployment of the National Guard in Memphis, Tennessee. The latest lawsuit says is against the push to send troops to Democratic-led cities perceived as overrun with crime. So even though Trump said his Memphis, Tennessee deployment enjoyed broad and bipartisan support, but yet 7 Tennessee officials are suing. Let's go to West Virginia. The IRS recently filed notices of a federal tax lien against the senator there. That's right, the former governor, Jim Justice. Remember that, folks? The guy who sits with his dog in his lap during COVID? Well, he's the latest example of ongoing financial troubles that have trailed the former governor and members of his business and family and their network of businesses over the years. Also, a crazy story, tragic story coming out of Washington. Congressman there named Tony Gonzalez. He's a former United States Navy veteran who's now a congressman. Well, it's come out that he was having an affair with one of his aides, a staffer, and it gets horrifically worse. Apparently, allegedly, that staffer killed herself. How? She doused herself in gasoline and set herself on fire, and she died. Yeah, it's an absolutely horrific story, and I can't imagine the details of it. I don't want to speculate about anything, but there are a whole bunch of controversies surrounding Republican congressmen. I just mentioned Jim Justice. Have you heard about Congressman Corey Mills? This guy's a real piece of work. A Florida judge has issued a protective order against this Republican congressman after his girlfriend accused him of harassment and threats. Apparently, he allegedly threatened to release explicit images and videos of her after their breakup and said he would, do it to harm any future partners. She stated these threats caused her significant emotional stress, and, she's suing him. So anyway, he denies the allegations, calling them false and claiming the legal system is being weaponized by a former political opponent. Oh, well, that must be it. So lots of scandals out there for Republican congressmen, and let's see, what else do I have for you? Oh, following the suspension of Jimmy Kimmel, Disney and Hulu apparently saw their average number of cancellations more than double, which was why they came back. That's the thing. That's the most important, I think, development about all that. Roughly 3 million Americans canceled the streaming service Hulu in the month after it temporarily suspended Jimmy Kimmel. About 4.1 million people canceled Disney-owned Hulu. Wow. Okay. I mean, a lot of people also remembered as a result that they had a subscription to Hulu. That might be one of the things. The hell is on Hulu? What are we watching over there? All right. Those are your headlines. Now it's time for The Clip Show. That's right. The best sound bites I can find from yesterday. Lots to talk about, lots to share. Of course, Jon Stewart was back hosting The Daily Show because he does that on Monday nights. So I thought we'd start with some comedy and end with some as usual as well. Of course, Jon took on the threats, the criticism before the No Kings protest coming from people like Mike Johnson and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, and shared images and video from the No Kings protest to counter that and more. Jon?
Perhaps you missed this year's annual dog parade because you remained inside all weekend because you knew that the No Kings protests would be taking place, and you heard what that might be like.
We call it the Hate America rally. I bet you see pro-Hamas supporters. I bet you see Antifa types. I bet you see the Marxist in full display.
This crazy No Kings rally this weekend, which is going to be the farthest left, the hardest core, the most unhinged in the Democratic Party.
Not the hardest core. I expected partial Marxism and hardcore, but not full display hardest core ha-Marxism. It's going to be like Mad Max out there with Chuck Schumer on flaming guitar. That's a real photograph. And so this weekend we sat in our bunkers, doors locked, windows boarded, muskets and cyanide pills at the ready, prepared for whatever the hardest core had in store. Do your worst. Display your Marxism to its fullest.
An estimated 7 million people gathered across some 2,700 No Kings rallies in cities from coast to coast in what has been described as one of the largest single-day demonstrations in U.S. history.
Not only were they largely peaceful, they were often joyful.
Domain folk classics? You monsters. Actually, it was kind of an incredible turnout that was somewhat inspiring. 7 million Americans, 0 mass shootings. 0. That's just sad. No mass shootings? My God. I mean, has that even happened before? Even the dog parade had some nipping. It wasn't a Hate America rally at all. I look forward to Republicans apologizing sincerely for implying that these Americans were, what's the word I'm looking for? Deplorable.
Yes, exactly. Well done by Jon Stewart and the gang over at The Daily Show. You know, I was hired by Jon Stewart to be the fluffer there. I was the warm-up comedian there at The Daily Show, and then Stephen Colbert stole me where I became the warm-up comedian there and went from there. CNN hired me to be on air. I left Colbert. It's all a whole thing. Yeah, that's right. Part of the family. All right, speaking of, let's get to I don't know why I said speaking of, but I had no segue to get back to the audio clips. Speaker Mike Johnson yesterday was asked about our dear leader, our mad king, our absolute insane sociopathic president of the United States, and his AI cartoon villain video of him flying a fighter jet and shitting on No Kings protesters. And here is how it sounded.
Speaker Johnson, you say that the Democrats had a Hate America rally, but what does it say that the President of the United States over the weekend released a video of him pooping on the American people?
The President uses social media to make a point. You can argue he's probably the most effective person who's ever used social media for that. He is using satire to make a point. He is not calling for the murder of his political opponents, and that's what these people are doing. I mean, they're in one of these photos. I think there's a picture of the president hanging in effigy by a noose on one of these, the one on the far end. I mean, it's unconscionable.
Oh yeah, well, I'm glad you found the picture. It is unconscionable. Is it unconscionable for the president to share that video, or no? That's not unconscionable. That's not a word you would use. What else do you have to say? How come you haven't sat Congresswoman Revolva?
I will administer the oath to her, I hope on the first day we come back, legislative session. I'm willing and anxious to do that. In the meantime, instead of doing TikTok videos, she should be serving her constituents. She could be taking their calls. She can be directing them, trying to help them through the crisis that the Democrats have created by shutting down the government.
How could she do that if she doesn't have the keys to her office? How could she do her job if you haven't sworn her in? Maybe she could do her. Maybe everything can be done without being sworn in. But why should she? Why would she? Why don't you just swear in, sir? Why don't you just get it done? Oh, we know why. Oh, here's Congressman Ro Khanna to weigh in.
What I'm outraged by is that I'm here in the Capitol, many Democrats are here in the Capitol, and Mike Johnson has shut the Capitol down. And why has he shut the Capitol down? He doesn't want to swear in Adelita Grijalva because that would be the 218th signature on Thomas Massie and my petition that would force a vote on the release of the Epstein files. And he knows 50 to 60 of his own members would defect.
Yeah, let's get it done. Speaking of Democratic congressmen, here's Jamie Raskin last night talking about no kings, this and more.
Does what you saw support the argument that this was a hate America rally?
No, on the contrary, it was, of course, totally positive, totally patriotic, and totally supportive of us getting the American government back in business again, reopening and supporting the health care of the American people and supporting the federal workforce. And, you know, I kicked off by saying that Speaker Johnson was talking about a Hate America rally, but that one had already taken place on January 6th, 2021, when Trump incited a mob of insurrectionists who violently assaulted our police officers, wounding and injuring more than 140 of them in order to overturn a presidential election. He lost by more than 7 million votes. That's what a Hate America rally looks like. This is what a Love America movement looks like. And that's why they've been trashing it for weeks now, because they know that millions of Americans are standing up against their authoritarianism.
All right, there's that. Very well done, Congressman. And now let's go to Anand Girandardhas, however you say his name. I always love his commentating and thoughts. He was on MSNBC's Morning Joe yesterday.
I was at the rally in New York, and I can tell you it was not a Hate America rally. It was a rally to free America from the tyrannical pretensions of Donald Trump. It was full of people of every background, every age, every color, every backstory, every continent of origin, who simply don't wish to be ruled by a tyrant. And there was actually, and I love this about it, there were flags. There were people walking around giving out flags. My kids ended up with 2 little American flags, like lots of people. The flag, I think, was more present than it even was a few months ago, than it has been sometimes in these rallies on the left. I think that's very good. It's important to reclaim the flag. You see flags there in these images you're seeing. And throughout the march on Saturday, there was actually the most patriotic thing of all, which is in people's signs, a commitment to stand up for people you may not even know, strangers who may be different from you, but share a country with you. That's actually the meaning of a country. I don't need to know you to have your back. To have the back of people like you. And it was a kind of bacchanal of humanizing. It was people insisting on standing up for in solidarity with people who may not be like them again and again and again. And it was a solidarity that someone as small-hearted as Donald Trump won't understand. And out of empathy for him, I can understand why it makes him so insecure that so many more people showed up on Saturday than to his inaugurations. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well done. I like that. I also like this. This is great analysis from one of my favorite legal analysts. It's Lisa Rubin on MSNBC talking about the appeals court judgment yesterday that's going to allow National Guard to go into Portland, Oregon. It broke yesterday. She got her hands on it, analyzed it quickly, and here's a couple minutes of an explanation that I thought was helpful.
Big deal?
It is a big deal, and I want to just correct one thing and then explain why functionally it is the same. This is a stay of Judge Immergut's opinion, and that's why it reached the Ninth Circuit as soon as it did, because this is an emergency motion to essentially pause her order. But as a functional matter, you are absolutely correct. It has the function of overturning her order and thereby allowing the president to send the National Guard back onto the streets of Portland. And Katie, I want to read, if I can, just from a little bit of the beginning of this 93-page opinion. It says, after considering the record, and by the record they mean all the factual evidence at this preliminary stage, we conclude that it is likely that the president lawfully exercised his statutory authority under 10 U.S.C. Section 12406. That's the statute we've been referring to as Title 10 when we have conversations about the National Guard deployments, which authorizes the federalization of the National Guard when the president is unable with the regular forces to execute the laws of the United States. And this is the important part. The evidence the president relied on reflects, quote, a colorable assessment of the facts and law within a range of honest judgment. We thus conclude that defendants are likely to succeed on the merits of their appeal, basically saying that when and if a court considers all of the record in this matter is tried and it gets back to an appellate court through an ordinary process where they have full briefing and full evidence, that they still think Donald Trump is likely to prevail there, because he has the discretion to determine as the president within a range of honest judgment when it is reasonable to deploy the guard.
This is what you and I were talking about last week. When you get into the slippery slope of discretion, when you start ruling when a president can do something that he has the power to do, then you start potentially handcuffing a president of the United States. And this Supreme Court has shown that they don't want any handcuffs whatsoever, even if it's a questionable assertion, even if it's an egregious assertion. They want to make sure the executive is a muscular executive.
And, you know, as I did when you and I talked about this privately, I'll let the viewers in on our behind the scenes.
Please do.
I said to you that, you know, I do see the Supreme Court pushing back, for example, on the first invocation of the Alien Enemies Act, where they essentially said, we have the authority to decide what the law is with deference to the president with respect to his Article 2 powers under the Constitution, particularly in the area of foreign affairs, where the president's powers are at their most robust. Will this Supreme Court, though, cabin the president's authority to decide when something is a rebellion or when regular forces are unable to execute on the laws? You now have what lawyers call a circuit split. We have the Ninth Circuit saying Judge Immercut's order must be stayed. Conversely, we've got the Seventh Circuit saying that the court in Chicago was right to prevent the deployment.
So when should we expect the Supreme Court to weigh in on this?
I think we could expect the Supreme Court to weigh in as soon as this evening, and that's because Chicago owes its response to the Supreme Court by 5 p.m. tonight on Trump's emergency motion to pause what that Seventh Circuit Court has decided, because without a Supreme Court say-so, he can't send the guard into the streets of Chicago.
Yeah,
right now,
we'll see. We'll see.
All right. There you go. Lisa Rubin, great analysis. And that's what the Clip Show does. Helps you understand what the hell's going on and take some of the best pieces of audio from the past 24 hours or so to do that. And finally, I like to start with some comedy, and I'll end with some comedy, a little bit of Jimmy Kimmel's monologue from last night on Jimmy Kimmel Live.
You know, it's hard to imagine, but one day, this avalanche of insanity we get buried under each day, deeper and deeper than the next, will one day be taught in history books in every place other than Florida. Isn't that incredible? What a stupid time to be alive. The good news is, well, it's the good news. Jesus is coming back, thanks to Mel Gibson. Mel Gibson has at long last cast the lead role in a sequel to The Passion of the Christ. It's called The Resurrection of the Christ. It's loosely based on Weekend at Bernie's 2. And there's no easy way to say this, but Guillermo, you did not get the part of Jesus. I know you wanted it so bad. Yeah. The role of Jesus will be played by this assistant manager of a skate shop in Tacoma, an actor named Yako Otonin. I don't recognize the name either, but that's the point. The movie will feature no actors you've ever heard of. The dialogue will be in a language no one speaks, and the film will make $700 million. It begins with Jesus awakening in the tomb and ends with Mel Gibson getting the Presidential Medal of Freedom.
All right, that was a little bit of Kimmel, and here is Colbert from last night.
Mime. This costume fad, it started in Portland, right? With the frog? It started... Portland in the house! This costume fad started out in Portland with one frog, and now frogs have become a symbol of resistance at No Kings. That's nice. I like little froggies. Froggies are important. Of course, not the first time amphibians have been at the forefront of social justice. Remember Woody Guthrie's famous protest anthem. They don't write them like that anymore.
It really stays with you. Timeless.
Right there.
Timeless.
There are also millions of great homemade signs like missing elected Republicans with a spine. Kristi Noem is like a box of chocolates. They'll both kill your dog. A man carrying a box containing the Epstein files, and even one elderly woman calling herself Grantifa. And you know, Grantifa, you gotta have Grantifa.
Gotta have Grantifa at the cookout.
Because when democracy calls, Grantifa is there to answer because she's still got a landline for some reason. By the way, democracy, you could call more often.
Yeah, Colbert, always great. And there you go. I like to start the clip show with a joke and end it with a joke. And there were some similar jokes going on between Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert because they were reacting to a lot of what was said and predicted of who would be at the No Kings rallies, why they'd be there, and who really was. So, good stuff. All right, now it's time to get to my interview with Bill Boyle. Bill Boyle, regular old caller. The old show impressed us so much that we started having him on as a guest of the new show, and he's quickly become one of your favorites over the past 4 years that we've been doing it here independently, and last night's appearance, no exception. We were live on several platforms. If you're not subscribed to Substack and YouTube, then you wouldn't know. You could have joined us, and I can use your comments during the live chat. You can follow Bill on Blue Sky at Bill B in DC. Of course, he's just a simple parking lot owner, parking garage owner in Washington, D.C., but he's very active there with his young teenage son and his wife, and I love talking to him. We had a great conversation, and it was enlightening as always. Learned a lot. Love his passion, love his intelligence, love his $5 vocabulary. Yeah, let's do it right now with Bill B in D.C. There he is. Thank you very much for joining me. I appreciate you being here on Monday night.
Happy to be here.
Lots to talk about, lots of things I want to ask you about. Specifically, I was thinking of just trying to understand and catch up with what happened, read the conversations between our dear leader and the heroic leader of Ukraine. Volodymyr Zelensky was back in Washington, D.C. Feels like it got a little bit maybe undercovered, but it was a really important conversation or visit, and it was supposed to establish some things. What are the takeaways? What's most important? What is going on?
Okay, so Zelensky's been trying to get Tomahawk missiles from the administration. And the administration has been willing to give them Tomahawks, or at least talk about it, because the Trump White House really wants a Nobel Peace Prize for their boss. And Trump's main motivation in all of this is not that he loves Russia, it's not that he hates Ukraine, anything like that. Trump wants to dominate the scene. He wants to get a peace deal in Ukraine so that he can justify demanding a Nobel Peace Prize. It's no more complicated than that. Underlying that, however,
only because Barack Obama won one.
Exactly, precisely. It's the most petty of motivations.
Right.
So anyone trying to read too much into it is wasting their time. What's more interesting is that underlying his demand and his neediness for this, there are really like sort of bedrock things about America's place in the world, Russia's place in the world, trade, the way the Pentagon feels about things, the way that, when they kind of go and push weird things, even on a bunch of Republican senators, they go, whoa, hold on. Where there are a lot of limitations and influences on what you can do in American foreign policy that Trump can't easily break, right? And people like to think of Trump as someone who can just do whatever the fuck he wants. But he came into office saying, we're going to completely blow Ukraine off. We're done. This is a waste. This is stupid. It's not our war, whatever. And the U.S. is supporting Ukraine almost to the degree it did before he came into office, and in some ways is being more aggressive against the Russians than Biden was. And that is because there are just underlying realities of the world that even Trump can't blow off. Maybe especially Trump can't blow off because he doesn't commit himself to the hard work it would take to really change policy. And so what's happened is, and this week is a really great example, the Financial Times claimed that Trump talked to Putin, set up this meeting in Hungary, and then had a meeting with Zelensky where he flipped out and said, you need to give up land and we're not going to give you Tomahawks and all this other stuff. This happened on a day, by the way, where Trump was freaking out about Venezuela. He was freaking out about the protest marches. He was freaking out about the shutdown. He was attacking Democrats. He was like all over the place that day. Well, the Trump White House very immediately denied that he said that to Zelensky.
Right.
Like immediately said, absolutely, we did not do that. But then they said, but it was the Russians who said they would give up territory. Like the Russians were the ones who were going to not demand all of the Donbass as part of a deal. And then guess what happened? The next day, the Russians came out and said, we never said that. And so there was all this mishigas and meltdown in the U.S. media, like, oh my God, Trump isn't giving them tomahawks, and he's giving in to the Russians because he loves Putin. None of that actually happened. Trump talked shit. If anything, he talked shit about the Russians being forced to give up more than they wanted, and he did not finalize a deal on tomahawks with Ukraine. But what has actually gone on is a lot of the planning and logistics and the training, because we can't just give the Ukrainians tomahawks and they can use them. That's going on right now. So the sort of, and this is a classic of the Trump administration, where because there's just so much bullshit that floats around, the actual things that are really happening, the press doesn't even notice it or doesn't want to bother to explain it, or the media, the National Defense Team is now 5 guys at the New York Times when it used to be 65. There's just not enough firepower, bandwidth to get into this sort of thing. And I mean, what's happening right now, and again, a lot of analysts who talk about this would say, Bill Boyle said, well, they don't know who I am, frankly. But if they knew me and listened to this, they would say, like, what the fuck? This is terrible. Trump is blowing off the Ukrainians again, etc. But what has actually happened is that Trump has, in effect, said to the Europeans, we'll give you pretty much whatever you want. You got to pay for it.
Right.
And the Europeans are taking Russian seized assets to pay for, in part, to pay for weapons for Ukraine. And they're putting up more money, and they're giving their own weapons, and they're ramping up artillery production, and they're ramping up drone production. The British, if I read this correctly, are looking to produce 85,000 drones a month. I know they're not at that number yet, but they're working to reduce that many and commit them to Ukraine. And so where we are right now is that the Europeans have stepped up. The U.S. has not stepped away. The Russians are losing 1,000 men a day. They are also now digging into their reserve system. They always avoided forcing people in their reserve system to fight. They offered to pay them. The Russians are now starting to have to go. And that means, by the way, pulling people out of Moscow, Kursk, et cetera, the core regions, and making them fight, who really don't want to be there, and who, when they get killed, grandmothers in Moscow are losing grandsons, not grandmothers in Kalmyk and whatever. And so you're seeing a situation, from what my perspective on it is, the Russians are really losing. They're really losing. And then on top of that, they are running out of money. The projected debt Russia is planning to take on next year is smaller than the debt service they have in their economy. Or on their budget deficit. So the Russians are now in a position where they've got such a big debt, they're having to borrow more to cover that debt, which then gives them a greater debt. In other words, it's a debt trap, and they're running out of money, and they're running out of runway, really. And they're not making big gains in Ukraine. In fact, most of the gains they've made this year, they've lost, or they have been so useless, it gives them no benefit strategically or even tactically. So I think where we are is where last year I would have hoped we would be with the Russian. I think I told you a year or so ago, I thought the Russians had until about 2026. And I think that has remained correct.
Going back.
And by the way, folks, you can listen to all of his old shows whenever I'm on, and I think you might be able to find that actual quote in there.
Going back just to specifically this weapon, the tomahawks, I don't know. I think people probably wonder the significance, and I guess significance. My quick search here is they're long range. They go like 1,500 miles, and they aren't easy. They usually launch from Navy ships, but they can launch from land, and you'd have to give them the launchers as well. It's not that easy, but I guess what I'm reading and seeing is that this weapon, these missiles, would be a real war changer for Ukraine to have access to them, and Russia really doesn't want Ukraine to have access to these missiles?
So think about all the things that we were told were totally going to change the war, right? We were told that the
F-16s,
the F-16s were going to change the war. The Javelin, handheld manpads were going to change the war. Those Turkish Bayraktar drones at the beginning of the war, they were going to change the war. They don't change the war. The Tomahawks aren't going to change the war. They will give Ukraine some more flexibility, some more reach, but Ukraine's already hitting Russia 1,500 miles into Russia. They're already going past the Ural Mountains, hitting targets. They hit a target a month ago next to the Finnish border. So, the idea that this changes everything is wrong. What it would do, though, it would give them more capability, more punching power to a degree. It would also really tell you that the U.S. was in the Trump administration.
Right.
Once they give them Tomahawks, and the Russians, by the way, were not saying, oh my God, this is going to ruin everything. They were basically saying the Americans are betraying us. Trump is betraying us. It's what it says. It's not necessarily what it does. It's the signal it sends. And, Moscow now is starting to get in a position where they need to worry about war weariness in Russia. Their argument was, hey, if Trump wins the election, we're going to be able to make a deal with Trump. Trump is going to, cut off the aid, and he's going to be on our side. And we're going to have all these trade deals, and this big bet will pay off. I think it's very clear right now that's not true. And I think that for Russians, that's sinking in. They're starting to say, oh, shit, this isn't going away, and we're not going to have beach houses in Odessa. And the Ukrainians look like they're going to be able to stick in this for a long time. And, the line they use about this is that, the machine will go on until it breaks. I think we're starting to see the machine on the Russian side creak a lot.
Let me move on to another issue, as hard as it is, but I want to get your take on a few things tonight. And that is the No King's Day protests of the weekend. You are Bill B in D.C. You were in D.C. What are your thoughts? I've read like 7 think pieces,
right,
on protest and these protests in general. What they mean, what they don't mean, what they lead to, what they don't lead to. We obviously heard Republican leaders across the board criticize them in the harshest of ways. These are America-hating terrorists and terrorist sympathizers and all of the rest. I'm not sure how effective that was or that is, or certainly it's far worse than saying basket of deplorables, but doesn't matter. What are your thoughts? What did you do, and what was the significance of these massive protests around the country?
Right. So I went downtown D.C., rode bikes around with my kid, took pictures, the usual. I heard numbers as high as 200,000 for D.C. That seems high to me, but it was certainly well over 50 to 70. I didn't see all of it probably, and that is the thing about these protests. It's interesting because they are intentionally spread out. There was a protest in downtown D.C. There was also 2 other protests in other parts of downtown D.C. There were multiple protests in Arlington. So, I think the thinking, and it's very smart, is don't give Trump one big thing to hit if he chooses to choose violence. And on the mall, I saw only on the way, a quarter mile away from the mall, one kind of uncomfortable looking group of National Guard guys, like 5 of them. On the mall itself, almost no federal officers at all. There were Capitol Police. There were D.C. police. I could tell you that as I rode my bike down 11th Street, and there were a bunch of D.C. police, I was yelling, fuck Trump, and holding my hand up and getting high fives down the street from MPD. It was a carnival atmosphere, and it was a fun atmosphere. And that gets at something that I think is a big deal, which is that, Mike Johnson and these guys are like, these parades or protests are satanic, and they're full of anti-Christical, anarchist, homosexuals who are trying to destroy everything that the Puritans held dear. And you go to the protests, and there's a bunch of middle-class people, riding their Cannondale, or with their kid in a stroller with a ton of very hilarious, animal outfits, inflatable animal outfits of all varieties. And I think that the Republicans make a gigantic mistake in turning these things or trying to turn these things into some terrifying thing. Because the average American sees on CBS News that night a bunch of people that look like them, who look like they're kind of having fun, and are certainly, it's obviously ludicrous the way it's described.
Yeah.
And the thing that an authoritarian project cannot countenance, the thing that it cannot accept, is to be made to look ridiculous. And that is what these protests, and thank God for Portland, Oregon. I am genuflecting and blessing you and whatever. Portland has been the Los Alamos of how to figure out how to make the Trump people look ridiculous. And, it's like a memeing everywhere. There's the meme of the guy and the frog where it's Morpheus. It's the frog saying to Morpheus, like, are you saying I'll be able to dodge, pepper balls? And then it's Morpheus saying, when you're ready, you won't have to. And then there's a video below that of the guys shooting pepper balls at the frog outfit and they're all bouncing. And it's just like amazing. Like I told you about Andor, that I thought that Andor picked up the actual majority cultural context.
Yeah.
Way better than Trump does. And in a weird way, you can see it in these protests, how they're like, I heard people saying I have friends everywhere.
Yeah.
Right. At the protests.
Yeah. It's such a great,
this country is inherently based on a moderate revolution. And I don't think that cultural truth ever goes away. And I think that the Trump people, fortunately for all of us, are going to forever be rowing against the current of what regular Americans really want, and which we're about to see, I think, pretty soon in elections in New Jersey and Virginia and a few other places.
What do you make of the fact that all these people came out all over the country, over 2,700 events, hardly any arrests, hardly any violence? If there was any, it would have been played way up. And they weren't even able to create the type of violence that they want to create with their propaganda cameramen behind ICE agents and so on. I mean, no violence, no arrests, no kings.
Yeah. And I mean, the two incidents of violence that I know about, one was some dude who brought a gun to one of the protests and was tackled by the crowd immediately, who called the cops over and they grabbed the guy and the gun, and that was it. It's almost a non-event. And the other was like a New York Giants fan in New York who someone grabbed his glasses and he fell and hurt his head.
I watched that video about 150 times. I don't wish suffering on people, including people I hate, but I do think my rule is, and I think, let's just talk about it because everybody's seen that video. By the way, I don't know if that was that was Sunday. It was after his team was up 33 points in the fourth quarter and lost to the Broncos. I don't know if it was before or after the game.
So it was PTSD. Yeah.
It was on a Sunday. Saturday was the protest, but clearly there was some, young folks out there. And anyway, here's the thing. I've told my daughters, if you ever say the N-word, especially to a black person, you deserve to get punched in the face. And in this case, he said the F word. He said fag. He called them all fags. I'll just say it. And then some guy took his glasses. Now, I don't think the guy should have taken his glasses, but as soon as he said fag, I think I will allow him to be have his glasses taken. And then somebody else tripped him, and I thought that was mean, and he slammed his face into the pavement. Of course, again, I don't wish harm on people or suffering, but if you're going to fall and not put your arms out, we're going to watch that video billions of times. Like the way he fell just on his face in a cartoon-like manner, and it was memed so quickly. I'm pretty obsessed with it, I got to say.
I felt like that video was a bunch of people acting like assholes.
No doubt.
Which in no way detracted from the protest marches at all. Like it just wasn't.
Well, it wasn't even on the day. It wasn't even on the same day as the marches. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So there really was no way, and there is no way to sort of turn these things into ways for the Trump people to leverage their authoritarian impulses or whatever. And I can tell you, I go on Facebook to where I am, and like there's nobody on the right going, "We got you guys." It's all very quiet.
What did you say a moment ago about the way? How did you phrase it when you're able to kind of ridicule and make fun of an authoritarian? You're not a very good authority. How did you phrase that?
Authoritarian projects cannot accept being laughed at.
Right.
It is anathema to them. I probably used some $5 word and should have just said they hate it. And they hate it because, authoritarian governments depend to a great degree on passive acquiescence of this idea that they have the power to coerce you. And when you make fun of them, that passive acquiescence of their power evaporates. Once you think the local block warden or, MAGA street captain is a clown, then you're not going to obey in advance or when he's not around. Right. And that's the bottom line.
Right,
that's the genius of these protests.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, Trump got a lot of mileage out of, and I still don't get it because it doesn't work on me at all. But a lot of people would say, well, he's actually really funny. And to me, I grew up with guys like him and I think, no, complete fucking asshole. But he, to a certain section of the country who, by the way, feel themselves oppressed, right? Think about all the Trump people who feel themselves oppressed and feel released by Trump dropping in an AI video crap on protesters.
Yeah.
That he is the sort of authoritarian version of that, where he's trying to, it's his power in that he can motivate a bunch of MAGA people with that. It's his weakness in that for the vast majority of people, that does not become your Il Duce or your Führer.
Yeah. He's
too ridiculous. He's too silly. He doesn't have, Mussolini's ability to talk about the future of Italy that he could create. It's all just backwards looking resentment and ball busting. It doesn't have the same legs that say other fascist projects have had.
What about the government shutdown? That's the other thing I want to ask you about. I saw some reporting, some polling that it just doesn't look great for Democrats even. I mean, really? I think Harry Enton on CNN, who I don't know,
no, dude, he sucks.
But he's so bad. Fair enough, but he was analyzing a poll. Let me try to.
And he always picks the thing that looks worse for the Democrats every single
Fair enough.
time. It's uncanny.
But I'm just wondering. Well, what are your thoughts on the current state of things as we head into? I mean, I saw one prediction; it could last till November. What are the consequences here? Who's going to get blamed? Seems like Republicans can take a lot of pain.
Well, so everything that I've just spent time talking to friends this weekend who know more than I do about Congress and the White House and whatever, and it feels like both sides are pretty dug in. Now, they're dug in for very different reasons, and you can be dug in for good reasons and you can be dug in for bad reasons. The polling, if you look at Nate Silver even, but G. Elliott Morris, who used to run 538, most of the polling shows that Republicans are being blamed for this 58%, Democrats like 28%, the rest don't know. It's very much Trump's Congress. This is the negative of a supine Congress, is that when, there's a fight over something like this, you get blamed because you control the whole government. You can't even pass it off on your own party in the House. It's so obviously Trump forcing all this. The Republicans think, hey, fuck it, we control the government. We are, I'm Donald Trump. I can do whatever I want. This is great. It's perfect. And we can stick it to Democrats by hurting them on health care, which they love. That's really the motivation. There's no real thought through other than that. I'll explain how you can tell there isn't. The healthcare subsidies that were put together were very explicitly written, in part by Democrats, to be subsidies only for COVID. Is that the first time you're hearing anybody say that?
The subsidies only for COVID. Oh, they were temporary subsidies.
They were explicitly written as temporary subsidies.
Yeah.
That should be, and it's funny, someone who is an ex-Republican because of Trump, who is a lobbyist, and it was wild to me. They're not saying this. They're not saying it. They're not saying, hey, these were temporary subsidies. Democrats agreed they were temporary subsidies. You're not hearing this at all. And now it's too late for them to say. Because Democrats very adeptly, and I know some people are going to fall out of their chair when they hear Democrats being described as adept, but they very adeptly said, your cost is going to go up. It's going to go up by X. It's going to be bad, and it's terrible. And if anyone brought up that they were COVID subsidies, the Democrats just ignored it and said, number's going to go up. That's it.
Right.
To the degree that Marjorie Taylor Greene is on the Democrat side on this, because she's saying my constituents are going crazy. They're looking at their costs going from $500 a month to $2,300 a month or worse. Democrats are on the politically right side to be on this. People love their subsidies. The economy is bad, by the way. People are relatively making less money, inflation, everything else. This is how you create a wave election, is by screwing people on something like this. I think there's already a wave election coming. I think that this will just, if it goes for a long enough period, or if Republicans somehow manage to force Democrats to eat this, you're going to get a wave election anyway. You're going to have Republicans vote against Republicans because they're furious that their healthcare costs went up by $15,000 a year in the middle of an already bad economy with tons of inflation, right? Trump's people just don't really, the boss wants this. That's what we do. That's it. Russ Voigt says, fuck them. It allows us to fire a few more people, which it isn't really. So I think it'll go on for a while because they're both committed. Democrats are committed for good reasons. Republicans are committed for the dumbest possible political reasons. At some point, the dam will break, but I don't think Democrats are giving in. I really don't. I think Democrats are happy to sit here and do this. And by the way, when you've already torn the heart out of the government, the Democrats are like, okay, what are you going to do to me? You didn't already do to me. And I can tell you it's very fascinating what I see in D.C. is business is not that much down during the shutdown because it already got slammed before the shutdown.
Right.
They already cut a big chunk of the government out. So we are already used to lean times. So it doesn't have the effect. I don't think the unions are, and that's the thing. Do the Democratic unions eventually start to scream about it? What happens eventually? But, Trump's idea, we're not going to pay these people, he loses in court immediately on that. Over. So they're going to have to pay all these people anyway. I just don't see what their leverage is. What are they going to do to Democrats they haven't already done? What are they going to give them that Democrats need? Democrats don't actually need anything. If this continues and they screw these people out of these subsidies, they're going to vote for Democrats anyway.
What do you make of Speaker Johnson not seating this woman who won her special election in Arizona, Grijalva, like 3 weeks ago? Everybody knows the reason. It's because she'd be the vote on discharge petition.
No, that's not true. That's not true.
That's not the reason why he's not seating her?
No, I mean, she's brown, and brown people don't deserve to sit in Congress. I mean, that's obviously. I am completely kidding. He is 100% not seating her because he's terrified of the Epstein vote. Yes.
And what they're trying to do is they're trying to drag it out and convince a couple of Republicans in the House to pick them off. But why? I mean, maybe they'll succeed, but you would think.
I think that even a lot of the crazier House members, is Tom Massey going to say, like, sure, the president is screaming that I need to be kicked out of office. So sure, I mean, it's hard.
Well, he's not going to, but I think they just need a couple of others. But my understanding is that there's like 30 or 40 Republicans that are ready to vote on this. That's what the rumor is. Eric Swalwell said it publicly, but
the files are going to come out eventually. I don't think that Johnson is the evil sort of bastard that Trump is. But he knows that it's sort of like this is going to be, the child molestation stories about Epstein. They're sort of like the POW MIA flags you see flying around still.
What?
There were no POWs in Vietnam. Vietnam was not hiding missing in action Americans. In fact, they helped us find missing in action Americans.
What?
Within a couple of years after the end of the war.
There were no POWs?
And yet, what's that?
Go ahead.
There were no, the Vietnamese never held on to any American POWs. They did not. They let.
There's no evidence or record of that?
What's that?
There's no evidence or record that they held on to people.
Yeah. It's all bullshit. It's all
Chuck Norris made it all up.
It was America's saving myth for the fact that we treated our own soldiers like shit. So then after the war, the saving myth became, we are really going to be there for them now and get all these poor guys that are still rotting in bamboo prisons in Vietnam back to America. It was a complete, utter legend and lie that made people feel
I didn't know that. You would know that.
Oh, believe me, I say this to people and they get real mad, and I go, "Okay, show me any evidence."
Yeah.
I live around the corner from a guy who spent that very old guy now who spent 15 years as a U.S. military guy after the war, going back to Vietnam to retrieve remains. Like the Vietnamese government was like, "Hey, we found bodies. Come here and get them. Let's bring a priest in and do this the right way, etc." Like that. So those flags are a myth that will not die about something that never occurred. Epstein is a myth that occurred, and it's got the same emotional oomph, not to Democrats, interestingly, but to Republicans and to MAGA people. They are obsessed with the idea that elites are out stealing children and taking advantage of them sexually. They're totally obsessed. That's what Comet Pizza was about.
Right.
And this is the problem for these guys, is that it's a real thing, or it's a half real thing that can really hurt them in the real world politics in ways that most other things can't. Particularly if it turns out if Trump but even more than Trump, if just a bunch of other Republicans who are still around or were just around are implicated. I think it'll be a very severe problem for them. I think it already is, frankly.
What about that movie Christian Bale and Steve Zahn were in? Wasn't he a POW? Wasn't that based on a real life?
During the war.
It was during. It wasn't right. It wasn't after the war.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought I had.
After the war, it was like, okay, we're done. The war's over.
Rambo 3.
Was that Afghanistan or was that Rambo 4?
I don't know.
Forget. Yeah.
Aaron, the farmer in the live chat, said that one.
Look at it this way: there were bars in Vietnam called Rambo.
Really?
Mm-hmm. There are famous bars, a couple of Apocalypse Now bars, in Hanoi and Saigon. So it's not like the Vietnamese were like, this is a thing never to discuss. They were like, whatever, Americans are nuts. They'll come and spend their money here. So great.
I want to ask you one more thing. There's been this kind of conversation and debate, even within folks here at the stand-up community. We were talking about it Thursday night at the Hangout. You weren't there. People should come. The Hangouts are awesome. We have great time. Having this discussion about giving credit to Trump for the Middle East, quote, peace process that he helped usher in, the hostage exchange, which the peace ceasefire lasted about 6 hours. There's violence has erupted. 97 Palestinians were killed. A couple of IDF soldiers were killed. So there's no peace. But what do you make of the idea that he should be given credit? Is there some reporting that during the Biden administration, Trump called Netanyahu and scuttled a deal that was about to happen? I'm not sure how good that reporting is, whether or not it happened. But if it's the truth, it would be not unlike Nixon in Vietnam, Reagan in the hostages. Like, when before they get elected, say, hold on, let me get credit for that. It'd be like Trump scuttling the immigration reform deal that was going to potentially pass in Congress. So don't do it until I get elected. Anyway, what do you think about the credit he deserves or does not?
So I don't think he deserves a lot of credit because he hasn't actually accomplished very much. And I think that should be the standard. It shouldn't be. I mean, I've said this to you before. The one slightly okay thing about Donald Trump is that he apparently is committed to the idea of like, it'd be great for me to end these wars. Now, his motivation is he wants to be the great world peacemaker, right? But he also seemed, even though his motivation sucks, he actually does seem committed to the idea that like the war in Ukraine should be over tomorrow. It should stop.
Yeah, but like even that's transactional. J.L. Covan had a really good rant on this where he basically argued that Trump got a plane. This negotiation went through the Qataris.
That's a separate one. I'm talking about Ukraine and Russia.
Yeah, but I'm talking about in the Middle East. The Qataris were the negotiator, and they gave him a plane.
Yeah, but that plane benefited the Qataris. The Qataris didn't give him the plane to help with those negotiations. They gave him that plane so they could get a base in Colorado.
Trump did not like. Well, there was that too. Trump did not much like Qatar
Trump is not going to extract a price from the Qataris to help the Israelis. He's going to extract a price from the Israelis.
Well, he
the
certainly
Qataris actually are a sort of moderate, semi-neutral interlocutor in that.
Yeah.
That plane was for other things. And I think that, by the way, Bibi didn't want this ceasefire. Trump forced it on him.
Right.
And there's a certain amount of an interesting thing that happens with Trump in that guys like Bibi and Putin and Erdogan and Modi and Xi and Trump, they all really politically depend on the political sense of their, what's the word for it? Not machismo, but their I don't know, they can't be challenged at home. And they can't look like other countries can push them around. And so when Trump goes out in the world and says, I want a peace deal with Putin, fuck you, do a peace deal. Just stop on the firing line. Putin almost by definition cannot agree to that because it will kill him politically at home.
Right.
Because again, it's the sort of, you can't make fun of authoritarian that kills them. What you also can't do is they can't allow themselves to be diminished. Right. And if Trump says to Putin, this is the deal I want, get in line and do it, that has real implications politically back home. It's why Trump is having so much trouble making trade deals with anybody, because he's trying to dominate everyone. And it's not, ironically, Trump is the one guy who doesn't need that. But he is operating the way they do and not doing it as well. And they're just saying, fuck off. We're not going to go along with you because you can get away with it, but Xi can't look weak. Modi can't look weak. Erdogan can't look weak. And I think that you're seeing that with Israel and Gaza. The reason Israel's not as strong as China or India, right? So it couldn't really defy the U.S. too far. But of course, what our friend Bibi does is that as soon as Trump's attention wavers, he kills the deal, breaks the deal some way. Right? And that's what we saw in Gaza. There was a temporary deal. I'm very happy some of the hostages got released. Some bodies are returned or whatever. But we've just switched to a place where now Hamas can get the shit kicked out of it by Israel.
Right.
And can't really do much about it. Trump will say, hey, I got you a peace deal. And that's it for them. And they're done.
What do you make of these fishing boats or drug smugglers being assassinated off the coast of South America?
In Colombians in Colombian waters.
It's pretty...
there's two things that happened. The head of the Southern Command quit.
Yeah, I saw that.
Well before he would normally have quit. And the reporting is that he did so because it was illegal. And he was like, look, I just can't keep doing this. Like, this is totally illegal. The second thing that you notice, they hit one boat. 2 people alive were taken by U.S. forces. These are what did Trump say? Every time we hit a boat, we're saving 25,000 American lives. Well, presumably this wasn't their first trip on the boat, or they weren't passengers on a cocaine boat. And what is the U.S. doing? Just returning them to the countries they come from. Why? Because it wasn't a cocaine boat. We are randomly or semi-randomly hitting fishing boats in the Caribbean Ocean. A, to provoke Venezuela. B, because Trump saw a clear and present danger 40 years ago and got the exact wrong message from it. And it's totally against international law, and it underlines just the sheer fucking stupidity of these people. Just the sheer stupidity.
In the past, when Obama and Bush would assassinate people with Hellfire missiles from Predator drones in a place like Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iraq, Yemen, including al-Awlaki, who was like one of the most effective recruiters of extremists, but also an American. That was very controversial. But the thing was, you knew who they were. Like,
oh yeah, this is
they
not
were
even
named.
making
Like
that
these people that were apparently killing, they're not even saying who they are. There's no evidence of a crime against them. They're just seemingly killing people. And by the way, you keep saying cocaine boat, which is hilarious, and it's also my safe phrase. But regardless, you don't know if there's any cocaine on that boat. You don't know that. And if there is, prove it.
Exactly. And by the way, if there is, and you're able to hit the boats like that, you could also intercept them.
Yeah, well, yes.
And by the way, killing Colombians on a Colombian boat in Colombian water is an act of war.
Did we do that?
It is an act of war. We did do that.
Oh, boy. And
Colombia was our best ally in South America.
Right.
Up until
for 50 years.
January 20th of this year.
Yeah.
They were our best ally. Now the Colombians are like, fuck the U.S. You know, I mean, can you imagine if the Colombians hit an American boat in American waters?
That wouldn't be the same.
And killed, they killed Americans, and the Colombians were like, drug boat. What are you supposed to do about it? I mean, it's just, it is so off the reservation, so off-piste. It's insane. But again, you know, and I've said this to you before, when Trump got reelected, and I did everything I could to help him, to keep him from being reelected, that's when I said, okay, I was always worried about what was going to happen. Now it's happened. And I think that people need to get in that, I won't preach too long on this, but people need to get in the mindset of stop going, oh my God, every day's a crisis. What are we going to do? Just go do it. Just get out there and, you know, go to the marches, organize, do what you need to do. I mean, I will tell you that a thing that I do is I talk to the various police forces around the city when I'm out. And I ask them, how do you feel about these clowns and the masks running around? And I will tell you, they do not like it. Up to and including Customs and Border Patrol. You would think Customs and Border Patrol would be like, hey, yeah, you know, whatever, they're trying to do a job. They were like, no, these assholes are untrained and the masks are bullshit. They were like, look at us. None of us are wearing masks. That's my name. You want my badge number? This is Customs and Border Patrol saying this. And what an officer said, I won't say what group he was from, but he said, you know, imagine if you're us and you've been doing what we've been doing for 20 years and highly trained, and some file clerk who works at DHS gets a $50,000 bonus to come out here and violate people's rights.
Well,
and I would strongly recommend everybody to talk about that aspect of things with the police they know. A bunch of unprofessional, totally, and by the way, immune to prosecution, whatever they do, because you don't know who actually hit you, called you something on the street, took a shot at you. And I have a friend who had an unmarked ICE vehicle intentionally bump her off her bike with their car.
Jesus.
And then take off. So, you know, it's out there and it's a real thing. And then the other thing I will say is I'm sure this stuff is hard to parse if you haven't been in Portland, Chicago, DC, LA.
Yeah.
People feel very like, well, how can it be that bad?
Right.
And I describe it to people who are not from these places, and you can tell that they really don't want to believe it's happening. It's happening.
Yeah.
Like,
by the way,
gigantic amounts of violations.
New reporting. Let's see. This is the Atlantic magazine. 1/3 of ICE Academy recruits are failing out because they can't pass a personal fitness test. The pass, recruits must do 15 push-ups, 32 sit-ups, and run a mile and a half in 15 minutes, 14 minutes. They can't do it.
I have bad knees. I'm 58 years old. I'm only just getting back in shape. I could have done that before I started working out.
Yeah, but you're not.
Pathetic.
You would fail the ICE test, but that's neither here nor there. You're riding around in your bike.
I would fail the moral section or the immoral section of the test, the amoral section of the test.
Well, great talk. As always, your wealth of knowledge, information, opinion, and moral clarity. We appreciate whenever you join us, Bill. If people are watching right now, a lot of people are watching, and go over and follow Bill on Blue Sky and learn more from him there. And Bill,
I hope the insults are flying fast and furious on the chats.
Are they? No.
I hope so. I can't see the chat, so you should set it up so that somebody like me can see the chat.
Oh, I know, you can't see it. I guess I have to figure out how to put it on the screen. I'll do that next time.
Right. Because I was insulting Christian Finnegan and he couldn't see it.
Oh, right. No, we got to do that. Bill B in DC on Blue Sky.
Only on Blue Sky. Twitter exists, but I never use it. And I'm going to be in Austin the rest of the week. So
see him in Austin.
Any good spots?
What are you doing there?
Going to eat meat, see music, and drink beer.
Cool. Great. Have a great time. Yeah. Send me pictures.
Absolutely.
I appreciate you, buddy. Thanks for doing this.
Cheers, my friend.
Thanks, everybody, for watching live. And that is it. That's how it sounded. I'm back here on today's podcast. Thank you very much for listening today. If you listened all the way here to the end, you're called a honeybee. That's right. You're very special, and I appreciate your dedication, your curiosity, and your support. Patreon.com/Pete Dominic. You can always pay more than $5 if you want to. Several of you have done that. I'm very grateful for it, keeping us going here. Welcome to new subscribers. If you're listening all the way to the end, you're now a honeybee. Congratulations. Email me if you're a honeybee. standupwithpete@gmail.com. Tell me what I can do better. Tell me what I like, what you like. Tell me what annoys you. Anything. I'm open to all of it, and I'm easily persuaded. John Carroll is a Grammy Award-winning singer-songwriter. He's got a new album out. He's one of the founding members of the Starland Vocal Band. You know the song Afternoon Delight. That's right. Well, guess what? John Carroll's new album release party, November 6th in Virginia. I'm planning on going. Hope to see you there. JohnCarroll.org. Buy that album right now. Pay John for this music. This song is on it. We love him. We appreciate him. We appreciate you. Thanks for being here, and thanks for being you. And I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Stand up, you gotta stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. Don't get up off of your butt, down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Oh, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of a stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change would begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up, and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand